The moon of Zarn was dead long before the war ever came to it. Its sky was nothing but swirling ochre dust, whipped by ceaseless storms that scoured the jagged plains. Its thin atmosphere held no scent but the metallic tang of its own rocks, and no sound but the endless hiss of wind. The Dominion had chosen it for one reason only: its mineral-rich crust, which fed their weapons foundries across 3 sectors. The ZYRN coalition had attacked to cut that supply line. Both sides expected a quick, bitter skirmish. No one expected the humans. General Vieroth of the Tar Dominion watched the battle unfold from the viewport of his command crawler. It was an ugly, insectal machine, crawling over the grit like some armored predator. Below him, the war played out as it always had: soldiers in composite carapace suits, plasma rifles barking into the storms, troop lines advancing in the slow, methodical push that defined Dominion warfare. ZYRN forces resisted with their usual stubbornness, their rail weaponry cracking through the wind. The balance swayed but held. Then the sky tore open. At first, Vieroth thought it was another ZYRN trick, an orbital bombardment masking as a meteor shower. But the streaks weren't falling randomly. They came in controlled bursts, black shapes cutting through the rust-colored haze. Dropships. Dozens of them. They bore no ZYRN insignia, no Dominion markings. Their hulls were matte and angular, almost predatory in design. They hit the ground hard, not with the cautious, calculated descent of troop carriers, but with the finality of hunters who had already chosen their prey. The side hatches burst open, and the humans emerged. The Dominion had heard whispers about them, a fledgling species in some remote star cluster, barely unified, technologically primitive by galactic standards. They were not part of the war, not even on the maps of this conflict. Yet here they were. And they did not march. They moved. Each squad advanced like a single organism, their armored forms low and fast, hugging the terrain in ways Dominion soldiers never considered. They didn't fire in wasteful suppression lines. Every shot was deliberate, every burst of their strange weapons ending a life. The rifles screamed rather than thundered, a raw, tearing sound that made Vieroth's mandibles click involuntarily. He could not place the energy signature. It wasn't plasma, wasn't rail, wasn't any Dominion standard tech. The humans flowed around obstacles instead of stopping to destroy them, appearing on the flanks of entrenched units with impossible speed. They were there, then gone, then behind you before your targeting HUD even updated. Dominion forward units began calling for reinforcements within minutes. Not hours. Minutes. In the choking dust, Dominion squads tried to regroup. Orders shouted across comms were drowned in screams and static. The humans didn't seem to rely on the same cumbersome coordination. Vieroth realized, with growing unease, that they didn't need to. Their movements were reactive, adaptive, as though they could read the enemy's intentions before the commands were even spoken. A Dominion heavy gunner set up a plasma repeater behind a rock ridge. His weapon spat a river of molten fire toward the advancing humans, and for a heartbeat, it seemed the line might hold. Then one of the humans, taller than the rest, marked with a single white stripe on his helmet, broke cover. He sprinted straight through the withering heat, armor glowing from the impacts, until he closed the distance. One motion. One throw. The explosive charge landed beside the repeater. The ridge vanished in a plume of dust and shattered metal. Vieroth ordered his artillery to target the humans directly, bypassing the ZYRN lines entirely. His tactical display lit up with firing arcs, the whine of long-range cannons charging. When the first barrage hit, the humans scattered, not in panic, but like shadows breaking under sudden light. They melted into cover, using the shattered terrain itself as armor. Then, impossibly, they started advancing through the bombardment. No Dominion soldier would have risked such a move. The sky was death itself when the heavy guns spoke. But the humans moved as though they had rehearsed this chaos. Shells landed around them, dust and rock exploding in all directions, and they simply kept coming. The dust became their ally, blinding Dominion optics while their own targeting remained unhindered. The first Dominion flank fell in 17 minutes. The second lasted 22. By the time the third line began to buckle, Vieroth understood something that froze him deeper than the cold of Zarn's storms. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Somewhere across the battlefield, a ZYRN commander issued a ceasefire. Vieratha's secondary monitors showed the enemy pulling back, their soldiers retreating from positions they could have held for hours. But it wasn't fear of the Dominion that drove them, it was the humans. Even their enemies didn't want to be in their path. Vieratha's comms officer, a youngling barely through his first campaign, whispered, "Sir, they're not fighting with the ZYRN. They're fighting through them." And it was true. The humans didn't discriminate. Dominion, ZYRN, it didn't matter. Anyone between them and their objective was simply erased. By the 6th hour, the Dominion's tactical map was a smear of red retreat signals and static. Vierath could no longer tell where the front lines were. Every unit sent to slow the humans simply disappeared. The command feeds showed only brief, violent flashes before the signals cut out. Through the viewport, the storm shifted just enough for Vierath to see them directly. A dozen human soldiers moved in perfect synchrony, weaving between jagged outcrops, their dark armor flickering with faint blue HUD lights. The leader turned his head toward the crawler, though there was no way he could see it at that range through the dust. Yet Vierath knew the gaze had found him. For a moment, they paused. Then they kept advancing. When the humans reached the mineral refinery at Zarn's equator, there was no siege. No negotiation. The Dominion defenders surrendered without firing a shot. Hours later, as the dust began to settle over the shattered plains, Vierath received his final report. Every Dominion asset on Zarn had been neutralized. The humans had taken control of the refinery intact. And then, without a word, without raising a banner or transmitting demands, they had boarded their dropships and vanished into the storms. No broadcasts. No explanations. Just silence. In the days that followed, rumors spread across the sector. Some claimed the humans were mercenaries, others swore they were ghosts from an old war soldiers thought extinct. Dominion propaganda called them terrorists. ZYRN reports avoided naming them entirely. But among those who had fought on Zarn, the truth became a whisper that spread from barracks to barracks. They weren't there to win the battle. They were there to remind us what fear feels like. And for the first time in his long military career, General Vierath realized the Dominion might not be fighting for victory anymore. It might be fighting for survival. The Volari fleet had ruled space for 4 centuries. No one dared challenge them in orbit, not the Yaran Republic, not the Thul core clans, not even the rogue warlords that haunted the dark trade routes. The Volari's war doctrine was perfect. Every battle plan was calculated down to the last fraction of a second. Every maneuver had been refined over centuries of conquest until victory was simply the inevitable outcome of their arrival. The siege of Yastel III was supposed to be no different. The Volari fleet hung above the planet like a wall of obsidian teeth. Battleships with kilometer-long spines, carrier-class dreadnoughts bristling with plasma batteries, destroyers cutting the darkness like razor fins. From orbit, their bombardment rained fire across Yastel's continents. Cities burned in white-hot waves. Resistance pockets were erased one after another. Volari Fleet Commander Orek Talos stood at the forward bridge of the Dominance of Stars and allowed himself the rare luxury of satisfaction. Victory was not just assured, it was already written. That's when the anomaly appeared. It was subtle at first, a ripple across the starfield, as though space itself had flinched. Sensor officers murmured about gravitational lensing, possibly debris from the bombardment. But the readings didn't match. Then came the second ripple, and the third, each sharper, closer. Multiple FTL signatures, the sensor chief announced. Point of origin, unknown. Talos frowned. Unknown was not a word the Volari military tolerated. Every known species FTL drives had been catalogued, their warp signatures mapped. But this was something else. The arrivals did not emerge in the predictable, elegant arcs of Volari warships. They tore into real space in jagged bursts, like knives punching through fabric. The newcomers were human. Not that the Volari knew the word yet. Their ships looked wrong, too small for battleships, too large for escorts. Their hulls were dark, absorbing starlight rather than reflecting it, bristling with strange angular protrusions. They didn't form a perfect wall or a crescent attack line. They were scattered. Messy. Disorganized. Talos almost laughed. Primitive formation, he said to his officers. They'll be ashes before they understand their mistake. The Volari opened fire first. A broadside of plasma lances streaked across the void, aimed to tear through the leading human vessel. The shots never landed. The target ship veered sharply, impossibly sharply, sliding past the energy barrage at an angle that should have shredded its inertial dampeners. The return fire came an instant later. It wasn't plasma. It wasn't kinetic slugs. The human weapons fired pulses of coherent light so bright they momentarily blinded every viewport. On the tactical displays, Talos watched as 3 Volari destroyers winked off the grid, their hulls ruptured in perfect, surgical lines. The bridge went quiet. The Volari fleet doctrine did not account for unpredictability. Every enemy they had ever faced either matched their elegance and lost, or broke in panic. The humans did neither. They swarmed. From their scattered entry points, they wove an invisible web, cutting off Volari ships from one another. They ignored the dreadnoughts at first, slicing into the destroyer wings, severing the arteries of the fleet. Then, without warning, they hit the carriers one moment outside weapons range, the next moment bursting from FTL directly beside their prey. Boarding pods launched like iron seeds, embedding into Volari hulls. Within minutes, entire ships went dark. On Yastil's surface, Volari ground forces looked up in confusion. The sky, which had burned bright with the streaks of their fleet's bombardment, was suddenly chaotic. Blue-white flashes split the clouds as human strikes shattered orbital positions. Then the debris began to fall, first fragments, then entire ships, glowing as they tore into the atmosphere. The Volari soldiers stared in disbelief as the impossible truth became clear: their gods of war were dying in the sky. Talos refused to retreat. His voice was iron on the command channel. The dominance of stars will hold. All remaining vessels form on my vector. But his call went unanswered. The comm channels were filled with static, half-words, and screams. The humans had jammed communications, not in the slow, methodical way Volari warfare did, but completely, instantly. His fleet was no longer an army. It was a scattering of prey animals in the void. They came for him next. The tactical display showed 2 human ships accelerating toward the dominance. Talos prepared to order a full forward barrage, but before the words left his mouth, one of them vanished, slipping into some kind of micro-jump and reappeared behind his flagship. That was impossible. The physics didn't work. You couldn't warp that close to a mass that large without catastrophic collapse. And yet, the humans had done it. The first salvo struck the Dominance's aft shields, cutting power to 3 of the main reactors. The second punched through armor plating thicker than a city block. The third Talos never saw the third. The blast threw him from his station, alarms shrieking through the bridge. Gravity failed. Darkness swallowed the ship section by section as human boarding craft latched on like lampreys. When Talos regained consciousness, the war was over. Through the shattered viewport, he saw Yastil 3's orbit littered with wreckage. Volari ships, his ships, hung broken and cold, drifting in silence. No human vessels remained. They were gone, just as suddenly as they had come. But their work was done. On the planet below, the Volari army had received no orders for hours. In that silence, the humans descended. Their dropships fell not like reinforcements, but like executioners. They landed in the smoking ruins of Volari strongholds and moved with the same terrifying precision as their ships, fast, decisive, unshakable. They issued no demands. No speeches. Where the Volari resisted, they were erased. Where they surrendered, they were ignored, left alive, but stripped of weapons, stripped of pride. When it was over, Yastil 3 belonged to no one. The humans did not claim it. They did not raise banners or fortify positions. They simply left, vanishing into the void as though the entire battle had been a message, not a conquest. That message spread faster than any fleet. The Volari fleet could be beaten. And in the hidden corners of the galaxy, in worlds long silent under Volari rule, rebellion began to stir. Commander Orek Talos, broken and disgraced, was brought before the Volari High Council weeks later. They demanded answers. Who were these humans? Where had they come from? He could not tell them. All he could say was the one truth burned into him as he drifted in the wreckage, watching the last of the human ships vanish into starlight. They fight like they've done this before. And deep in his bones, Talos feared the truth. That for humanity, Yastel 3 hadn't been a war. It had been a warm-up. To the Quar Alliance, Earth was a dead world. They had made certain of it themselves. 2 centuries earlier, the Quar had descended on Sol like carrion birds on a corpse. Humanity had been young then, scattered and unprepared. The Quar burned their cities, poisoned their oceans, and shattered the orbital stations until Earth's night sky was forever scarred with falling stars. When it was over, they left the ruins smoldering and marked the planet as extinct species, non-viable. The war moved on. The Quar forgot about the humans. Until Yalshara. The plains of Yalshara were a monument to Quar power, a rolling sea of black earth, dotted with towering war banners. On this day, the entire Quar Grand Army had gathered to crush the last remnants of local rebel resistance. Their forces stood in flawless formation, armor gleaming under the pale sun. General Vorthas, commander of the campaign, surveyed the field from atop his war platform. Victory was inevitable. The rebels were outnumbered 50-1. Their weapons were crude, their tactics desperate. It would be a cleansing, not a battle. The first sign that something was wrong came as a low hum, barely audible beneath the wind. Then the dust rose. From the far horizon, dark shapes emerged through the haze, not in neat ranks, but in a shifting, predatory line. They advanced with deliberate slowness, every movement measured. At first, Vorthas assumed it was another rebel detachment until his optics caught the armor. It was unlike anything the Quar had ever seen, black plating that rippled like oil under the sunlight, edges outlined in faint blue light. Helmets shaped to conceal every feature, with single, narrow visors that glowed faintly like the eyes of hunting beasts. No insignias. No banners. And no fear. Identify them, Vorthas ordered. The response from the recon officer was immediate and uneasy. Unknown unit type. No IFF transponder. Weapons, unidentified. Vorthas' claws clicked. The Quar military prided itself on knowing every enemy in the sector. For these soldiers to appear without record meant one thing: they weren't from this sector at all. The humans, though the Quar did not yet know that name, kept coming. The rebel lines ahead of them faltered, not from enemy fire but from uncertainty. Some even backed away, their faces pale, as if they recognized the newcomers. When they were 200 meters away, the first Quar rifle team opened fire. Blue plasma bolts streaked through the air, striking the human line only for the rounds to sizzle against their armor and disperse harmlessly. The humans did not break stride. Then they opened fire. Their rifles spat arcs of light, tight, controlled bursts that tore through Quar ranks as if their armor were paper. Each shot was placed with surgical precision. There were no wasted rounds, no random suppressive fire. Vorthas roared orders for a full counterattack. Heavy gunners unleashed streams of plasma, artillery launched skyward, but the humans moved through the chaos with terrifying ease, shifting positions as if they anticipated every shot. They were not just fighting. They were hunting. As the battle raged, Quar soldiers began to fall back in confusion. Whole squads vanished into the swirling dust as the humans closed in, their advance relentless. One Quar lieutenant, desperate for answers, grabbed a wounded rebel and demanded to know who these warriors were. The rebel's voice shook as he answered. "They're human." The lieutenant laughed until the rebel whispered again, "They've come back." Vorthas refused to believe it. Humanity was gone. The Quar had seen to that. He had read the historical orders himself: orbital cleansing, planetary saturation bombardment, biological sterilization. Earth had been rendered uninhabitable. And yet, here they were. The humans reached the Quar front lines in less than 20 minutes. They struck with brutal efficiency, rifles for distance, curved monoblades for close work. A human soldier would fire 2 shots, close the gap in seconds, and carve through an opponent before moving on without pause. Their discipline was unnerving, no one spoke, no one shouted. The only sounds were their weapons and the heavy thud of their boots in the dust. When Quar heavy armor rolled forward, massive 6-legged walkers with enough firepower to level cities, the humans didn't retreat. They swarmed. Explosive charges planted in seconds, mobility joints severed by shaped charges, optics shattered by sniper fire. Within minutes, the machines lay burning in the black soil. Panic began to ripple through the Quar lines. Officers screamed for cohesion, but cohesion was gone. The Grand Army, undefeated for decades, was unraveling under the pressure of fewer than 200 soldiers. Vorthas realized then that these humans weren't here to win a war. They were here to send a message. By mid-afternoon, the Quar formation had collapsed entirely. Survivors fled across the plains, pursued not by rebels but by the silent black armored figures who seemed to appear wherever retreat looked possible. Vorthas' war platform was the last command post still intact. He stood on its upper deck, plasma pistol in hand, as the human leader emerged from the haze. The leader was taller than the others, his armor marked only by a single vertical red stripe across the visor. He stopped 10 paces from Vorthas and simply stood there, weapon lowered, as if daring the general to act. Vorthas aimed his pistol. His claw trembled. "You're extinct," he hissed. The human tilted his head slightly, almost in amusement. Then he stepped aside, allowing Vorthas to see the burning plains beyond, littered with the wreckage of the Grand Army. No words were spoken. None were needed. By nightfall, the humans were gone. No ships were seen leaving orbit. No bodies were left behind. It was as if they had simply melted into the darkness. The rebels took the battlefield without resistance, the Quar had been broken, their forces scattered. In the days that followed, whispers spread through the sector. Some claimed the humans had never truly died, that they had hidden among the stars, waiting for the right moment to strike. Others swore they had seen them vanish into thin air, as though they were not flesh and blood at all, but vengeful spirits. The Quar High Command issued orders forbidding any discussion of the Yalshera incident. But it was too late. The phrase had already taken root, carried from mouth to mouth across the galaxy. They've come back. And for the first time in centuries, the Quar understood what their enemies felt when the Quar banners appeared on the horizon. They understood fear.